Welcome back. As we heard before, Internet of Things, uh, autonomous vehicles, machine learning algorithms, they all change our everyday life. But it also changes how bigger infrastructures work. For example, ports. And there are multiple of challenges. There are opportunities and challenges, of course. And that's the topic for this panel, where panelists will explore what's the current situation with implementation of digital solutions, what are the main barriers, and how to overcome them. I would like to welcome moderator Marios Nicolaou, senior consultant from Colleago, and his panelists. Please welcome.
Well, thank you very much. So ports are living and breathing organisms. They're big, extending all the way from the sea, the marine life, the surrounding areas, the environment, the ships, the maintenance people. It's much bigger than we think when we hear the word ports. They started the digitalization journey early. We see many examples of great ports across the world, and thankfully we have two of you here already to discuss what is going on. We have with us today a distinguished set of panelists from different sectors of the industry to catch the various points. And it will be simple. We will just go around 2 times. The first time we will discuss the current situation, your observations, and then we'll talk about the future. We also have a colleague online that will also participate with us. Therefore, it will be a truly phygital discussion. So, welcome to you, welcome to our audience, and thank you very much for being here. Ansis, our host here, the free port of Riga. We heard a lot, we see a lot of activities. Please let us know what's going on, what are you doing now, and what are your observations, and what do you see?
Good morning, good day, colleagues, and pleasure to be here, and pleasure to see you all here in our fantastic city of Riga, which is also a place for Freeport of Riga. I should say that a lot of things at the same time, but on the other hand, of course, ports, to my mind, are quite actually reluctant to change. So they've been, and it's not just because somebody doesn't want to change, but just how the industry is and how it was. And also part of that is shipping, and shipping is rather regulated internationally. And there we come to all sort of standards, which is part of the industry. But of course, world is changing, the technology is there, and also demands and society needs change. And I think that's also a big challenge for the port and ports as such in Europe and in the world, to go with time and also to digitize their operations, if so to say. Not so long time ago, if you talk about the different digital solutions, the most seen industry in the port most probably was everything around the containers, the container terminal with rather sophisticated terminal operating systems, and where also the need of time or time is a scarce resource which costs a lot of money. So that's where most of this concentration of the digital solutions was. But today, ports and port effect has gone much beyond the port boundaries. We operate with a lot of information, and Riga is not different. Some of that information is needed for the port, but some are not directly used. And what we have found that through the digital solutions, through the optimization of our procedures, so we can also provide solutions for our clients, and that means that making this geographical place, the port, much more beneficial for clients which are working in the port or together with the port clients. And of course, if you talk about the 5G technologies, that opens a lot of space for different solutions. And it's not just for the containerized cargo, but that's elsewhere in the port and also on the hinterland part, because also hinterland part is quite a big part of port operations. So that means the rail and road operations at the port level.
Thank you very much. We now turn to you, Santiago. Thanks for joining us. We understand the challenges of these times. Therefore, I mean, please let us know what your organization is doing. What do you see? What do you see around the world? And what's going on? What are the state of the industry?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting EMSA to be here today to join this very interesting panel in Riga. I apologize for not being able to be there. Actually, today we have a very interesting workshop which is touching on one of the issues that we are here discussing today in this panel, which is autonomous ships, which probably is the biggest, let's say, project that the shipping industry is having now in terms of digitalisation. So I think that is very timely to have this. When we are talking about autonomous ships, of course, we are not only talking about purely autonomous ships without anybody on board. So we are talking the acronym using industry in the shipping industry is MAS, which actually has the word autonomous inside it. But we are talking about not only autonomous ships, but we are talking about ships with reduced crew on board. We are talking about remote control ships as well, no? Which is something in which probably ports will be more involved, interested. So I'm not really, I'm the coordinating here the ship safety part, so I'm not really a port specialist, but I think I can give, a good picture of what's happening now in the shipping sector. No? In principle, I would say the autonomous ships appear as a natural evolution of technology, as it happened in the past, no, with the introduction of steam on board ships. But I would say much more than that. No? I think it's for the shipping industry, as the CEO of the Riga port said, it's a change of paradigm. So it's not only an introduction of a new technology on board ships, it's changing totally the paradigm how shipping is doing business nowadays. This change of paradigm, I would say, has several dimensions. No, one of them, as it was mentioned now, it's the regulatory side, because in an industry with dozens of centuries of history, taking out or potentially taking out the master out of the ship is not a minor issue. So it's actually can be a revolution. So we can have situations where the master will be remotely in I don't know, thousands of kilometers away from the ship, and obviously the responsibilities of that master cannot be the same as the ones that we have nowadays when the ship is on board the ship. We have also the possibility that there is no master at all, that it will be as software which will be maneuvering and sailing a ship. So all the changes that such a conservative industry as shipping has to get through are really enormous. No? So it's something that will take time. I would say the regulation has never been the big obstacle for industry to change. Obviously, when industry sees business model, they can always break through despite regulation using alternative designs, etc. No? I don't think the regulatory side it's the main obstacle that we have nowadays. It is an obstacle, that's for sure, to increase the digitalization, but I don't think is the main obstacle. I think there are other obstacles. No? For example, the qualification of seafarers. Well, will the people that are working on board, the people that will work on the remote control stations, will they have to be seafarers? Can they be IT experts? Do we need to increase the qualifications? Is the workforce in shipping prepared for this? Well, probably, I would say probably not yet. So I think there is a long way to go there. Second challenge is, of course, the infrastructure. So of course, there you have people with more expertise in ports, but obviously there is a need in ports to change as well in terms of the infrastructure to take, for example, ships with berthing capabilities. Are we ready, or people without crew? How they will be inspected, by the inspectors there in the port. Of course, we can also talk about operational issues. We can talk about cybersecurity. It is an issue that is gaining prominence and will gain more prominence with autonomous ships, because the risk of kidnapping a ship, of course, will be higher. Well, we have technological issues that I'm not going to enter now. I think that we can. In the regulatory side, as it was mentioned by the CEO of the report, where are we now, and what is EMSA doing about it? Well, basically, the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, is now heading towards having a non-mandatory code for autonomous ships, for MAS, for cargo ships only in 2025. So this is the objective. I don't know if it's too ambitious. We'll see. And then, well, the basis of this code will be function based. So what does it mean? It means basically that the code will not be too prescriptive. It will just indicate how the things. So what is the objective? What has to be a shift, but not how it has to be a shift. What is the advantage of this? Obviously, there is no technology. It's technology agnostic, so any technology can be used. It does not hamper really the new technologies. On the other hand, the disadvantage, I would say, is that for administrations, for authorities, it will be more difficult really to verify that this level of safety, which is an essential element, of course, how this safety will be maintained. When you don't have really prescriptive requirements, standards with which you can compare the ship which is being inspected. In EMSA, what we are doing to support this is to develop what we call RBAT, risk-based assessment tool, which is a digital tool, is a software that we want that it will provide support to administrations in terms of assessing especially the first mass models. So it will provide a harmonized way to make a risk assessment of the autonomous ships. So we hope that this will facilitate the implementation of this technology. In addition, we are making a study on the qualifications that will be needed for the future seafarers working on remote control stations. I think this can also facilitate a lot the implementation of this digital technology. And of course, we are also working in cooperating with many EU-funded projects, because in the R&D there is a lot of things ongoing. So we are participating in advisory boards of some projects at EU level to ensure also there is no duplication and coordination, because sometimes, as you know, it can happen. And as I said, we want to be also. We feel that there is a need. How should I put it? To spread the word, to educate a bit people about these digital technologies, that people come on board to follow what's happening, and they don't remain aside, because if we don't have shipping with us, it's a worthless effort. Of course, we are also working in the regulatory side. We're making some proposals to the IMO and supporting the Commission into it. But I think I've spoken too much already. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And I mean, that's exactly why we're here, to spread the word. And let's make a point that we're at the 5G conference talking about ports. So already, hopefully, we're starting and strengthening the conversation of the industry. Honor, thank you very much for being here from an important company, Frequentis. You're doing a lot all over the world. Please give us your view from where you're seeing the activities of today.
Yes, first of all, thanks a lot to be here. It's a great organization. It's my pleasure. It's my company's pleasure to be here. Welcome all the audience, all the people joining us. This is a good information exchange environment for all the participants around the world. As a Frequentis, as you may know, we are #1 market leader in the control rooms, and our DNA is coming from the critical communication, critical information exchange, air traffic management and air traffic controls. Many of the places Frequentis systems are used. Ports and maritime industry is very similar to this subject. When you look at these, our control rooms, mainly distribute this information to the operators, create situational awareness, manage the information, and distribute all the necessary information to the necessary points. In the maritime industry, port industry, you well defined this port is a living organism with its own ecosystem, with community effect surrounding, and internationally regulated. Digitalization is a big step for the maritime. When you make a digitalization, it is not enough just to have the digitalizing one port or two ports. We should make it internationally. A vessel coming from the Asia to the Europe should be able to communicate with the same systems. At the moment, as we can see in many ports, all the systems getting digitalized, but they are not communicating to each other, or the data is not converting to the information. Information is not converting to the actionable information, or getting information. As well indicated, mass autonomous vessels are coming, and information tsunami is on the way for the ports, for all the community. We have to manage this information. We should gather this information, data, convert it to the actionable information, and distribute all the related parties.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you very much. I think you made a key point that we need to keep in mind, that one port is not the end node. This is a very interconnected system, and you need interconnection between the ports. And we have here with us Venki, from one of the leaders in interconnectivity in Nokia. So Venki, please tell us now what's going on. How do we connect all this, and what do you see from your perspective?
Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, and thank you, Latvia, to show me snow for the first time for this winter season. I'm coming from Munich, where it is all wet. Snow has not really come yet, so I'm happy to see snow for this winter season. When I talk about maritime, what I do at Nokia is I head the maritime vertical within the enterprise sales of Nokia. We understood that technology by itself might not be the solution. We would need to understand the business of our customer a little bit so that we can make the technology work for them. Whether we talk about 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G, technology by itself will not solve the problems. We would need to understand what is the business case as well as what is the use case for which the technology needs to be used. So when we look at the ports, there are three main characteristics of a port. Ports are, for every country, the main entry point for trade. Apart from, let's say, air cargo, the main way in which trade comes into any country is ports. The second is security. Ports are the point of entry from a security point of view, apart from airports. And the third is environment, because when you talk about vessels and a lot of diesel-powered port equipment, they consume a lot of carbon dioxide because of fuel, and there's a strong mandate in terms of how do we electrify and how do we make it more sustainable. So those are the main challenges we see in terms of how do we make trade more efficient. And during the pandemic time, supply chain was one of the biggest challenges, right? Apart from, of course, the health. And how do ports process more and more containers and more trade? Similarly, with the whole cyber terrorism on the rise, ports become, again, very vulnerable to cyber attacks. And the third thing is on environment. And because of these challenges, we see our customers looking at digitalization. So my colleague spoke about data, right? Exchange of data. We want to do drones, we want to do cameras, we want to do IoT, we want to do terminal operating systems. These are all interesting vehicles on a nice highway, but if the highway is not properly paved with a good, reliable wireless communication infrastructure, where will you drive your Ferrari? You are saying you want to drive something really fast, but if you don't have the infrastructure for it, it becomes a challenge. And that's exactly where 5G comes in. And in some ways, it's the tale of two industries kind of coming together. Because typically, telecom industry has always built the technology for consumers like you and me. But 5G is one of the first fifth generation communication standardization where we said, I think the industry is looking at something big in terms of digitalization. And what can we do as a technology to enable them? That's why you talk about low latency, high bandwidth, millions of devices that can be connected. And that goes hand in hand with the story of this digitalization that ports are looking at, which is port 4.0. And as Nokia, what we have done is we have deployed something called private networks, so private 5G networks, which is nothing but the regular LTE that you see on your phone. But now imagine, instead of it being for the whole country, it is just for the port, where the port can control which SIM cards come in, what is the quality of service, so on and so forth. And we went ahead and deployed this at, I think, more than 30 or 40 terminals and ports. And we see some interesting business case, interesting efficiency gains. And I'm here to share some of that with you. So thanks again for having me in the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Rob, all the way visiting us from the UK in Portsmouth. We're very thankful that you're here. We are observing what you are doing, what the UK is doing. It's impressive. We want to share the learnings. So please let us know what's going on with all these wonderful things that you're doing over there in Portsmouth.
Thanks, Maris. First thing to say, it's not Portsmouth, it's Plymouth.
My bad. Wrong information.
Common mistake, but we're quite far apart geographically.
I apologize for that.
We're down in the southwest of England. Pleasure to be here. I think the difference with what we're doing compared to some of the other ports is that we've deployed a Nokia private network. We are looking at it from an ocean perspective, however. It's less to do with movement of goods and within the port itself. We're not a big container port. So I'm the director for something called the Marine Business Technology Centre, which is an innovation service that we've created to support the next generation of marine technology. And what's come out of that work is three main technology areas, probably unsurprisingly. First one is marine autonomy, which I think is common to a lot of the other speakers here. Clean propulsion, which Venki touched on, and what we're terming digital ocean, which is all about the data from the ocean itself, the port, and the environment. And the reason that we've done that is to create a test bed to allow the production of the next generation of technology. I think the key thing for us that we're struggling with, and I think everybody is struggling with, is the whole certification of marine autonomy. Okay, so it doesn't currently exist. So we're undertaking some work at the moment with both Lloyd's Register and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency in the UK to look at can we develop or help to develop a certification process that allows R&D activity in declassified waters. Because I think that's the real stumbling block. Autonomy exists, but unless you have that ability to test and prove technology, it's not really going to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So that really has to be the first stage. That's also common to clean propulsion as well, interestingly. So we are doing projects with hydrogen, electric vessels, ammonia, and various other solutions. But again, that certification doesn't exist. So we need to create that environment. What we can't do, however, is do that in isolation. So common to what we've been talking about, those standards need to be developed in partnership. They need to be done internationally. So the MCA obviously is part of the IMO network. I'm hoping that conversation will be taken forward so we do have that commonality. I think the other issue that we potentially have, and Venki can probably elaborate on this, is that yes, it is a private network, but that means that we need to issue 5G SIM cards in order to communicate with that network. So we kind of have to look at a solution whereby if a ship is coming into Plymouth, how does it communicate with that network? Are we sending a pilot out with a SIM card? That's probably not going to work. So there's a whole area of management and commonality that needs to be developed and discussed. So I think that's the key issue that I'm seeing.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Already, I think we're identifying a couple of agreements about the certification. I mean, thanks for noting that. it seems that it's a very good thing to get on and overcome. Also, the concept of the test beds that I think you guys have successfully implemented together, and we would like to learn from that and create more, even test beds, but even more centers of excellence that can touch upon and the digitalization, but also the business models that you're all identifying. We've not have too much time, but I would still like to touch on the future. So maybe in a little bit more brief, but more concise and actionable way. In the future, all this autonomy, is it real? Is it going to happen? But also the digitalization, let's touch a little bit on the changing and emerging business models. If we can touch on that a little bit. So Ansis, can we start with you, please?
Okay. First of all, autonomous ships or autonomous floating vehicles, it's not really a future, it's already a present thing, so they exist. We have also some in the port already. Okay, they are small, they are used for some specific purpose, in our case for hydrographic surveying. But still, I mean, there are a number of passenger ferries in Norway, in many places. In most cases, so yes, those ships are on a smaller scale, basically limited within the country. So that means that national administration is the one who can regulate or put one or another regulation out in order to this thing to operate. But in reality, most probably that will be the beginning. And it was clearly mentioned that certification at the global scale. Yes, to my mind, there will be for the future, there will be two directions. If the push or demand from the industry will be big enough, so that then the development will go its own way. It's like electric scooters. So initially there was no regulation, so you have them everywhere, and then somehow the regulation is put on feet afterwards. Or in other cases, so you may have like also in the shipping, so there are also kind of the not very good examples. It's like the technology is there, then it takes a decade to get to the regulation, and then after a decade, that technology which is adopted is already old as such. So there's a new one. So it depends, I think, for the global scale and really kind of the big shipping. It will take time, and there all sort of it was clearly mentioned this paradigm switch that many things will be different. So that means that many professions will be extinct in a way, and many new things should come into place. And that means that also for the education part, I think that's quite of important to my mind, is that we should think about those knowledges and those professions actually which will be needed in 15 years, because that's actually those guys, those kids are now starting the school, yeah? And if they will learn something what we need now, so the question what they're gonna do after 15 years. So I think all sort of these challenges, but for autonomous ships and autonomous vehicles as a technology, and also for what 5G provides, I think for the port, for auxiliary fleet, they're existent. I think they will develop pretty fast. Because they are handy, there's really also economic thing behind. So that gives first of all efficiency. That gives also economies, sometimes economies of scale, and I think that's the way it's gonna go. For commercial shipping, I think it will take a while.
Makes sense. Thanks a lot. I'm also watching the time. Santiago, let's go to you, and please let's hit the main points so we all have time to.
Yeah, I will try to be quick to compensate my previous intervention. I think it will be difficult to say something interesting, because I think everything has been said already. I think we have to look at what is pushing autonomy, how is industry pushing autonomy. The business models that we see now are quite interesting, no? So what we see is actually non-traditional ship owners are coming to the business of autonomy. So what we see, for example, the biggest two projects in Europe are in Norway. The Yara Birkeland, which is a chemical company that has become a ship owner due to the specific logistic models they have. ASCO also is a grocery company that has now in operation some small cargo ships, but bigger than all the others in Europe. which is also a non-traditional ship owner. So maybe in the future, what we will see is the new players coming into the shipping business. Some people are talking about Amazon, etc. No? So for the moment, I don't see the big shipping industry pushing for this too much. What are the main elements pushing the shipping industry? First of all, the scarcity of seafarers. That's a big thing. Is not only we are not talking about the lack of seafarers in the EU, but also coming from other developing countries. There is a scarcity of workforce, proper workforce. So this is something that can push for autonomy to be taken. There is an aspiration to increase safety, but this has to remain to be seen, because actually seafarers also avoid a lot of accidents. So the fact of taking out seafarers out of ships does not necessarily mean that the accident will decrease. Of course, the increase of sustainability, as we have seen, and the aspiration to decrease the operational costs, but obviously there will be an offset of that, maybe increasing communication costs, training costs, and some other software costs, for example. I think as the CEO of the Port of Riga has just said, if there is a sufficient push also from the industry, the regulatory side obviously will have to accompany that very, very quickly. In Europe, we have developed some guidance for the testing of mass. Tomorrow, we'll have a workshop with the member states of the EU and the Commission to see the first experiences using the guidance and how is it going. And then, so I think I will leave it here to leave more time for the others. Thank you.
For that. Honor, over to you.
Okay, with this time stress, I will go to that.
I know. We needed like 10 more minutes. Okay.
First of all, I believe certification will boost the business. When we have the certification internationally, it will be boost. And second of all, operational structure, operational responsibility changes needs to be defined. In the case of a vessel coming to the port, where will be responsibilities will be handed over to the piloting and berthing in the autonomous shipping will be very important, and information change, low latency, secure non-vulnerability of this network is very important. Private networks of the ports will be there and should be connected. As we were the part of the Broadway project, we see that most important subject is interagency communication. Interconnected systems is very important. Even though in the port community they have to exchange lots of information, cross-country interconnection between other systems is very important. So we should put all of these three elements together, mix it together, and international level we should boost this to place this business.
Thanks a lot. Venki, over to you.
Or fast.
Oh, all good.
Thanks for that, guys.
No, so I think just answering, so at least on the telecom world, the way we are handling, for example, the SIM card aspect, right? So the idea of eSIMs as well as network roaming between public roaming and private roaming will come in. This is a standardization process that will happen in the 3GPP standards, which means even if you have a, let's say, a Telenor SIM card and you are traveling in a vessel and then you are coming to, let's say, Port of Riga, you can still switch from that public network to the private network of Riga, right? So at least that's where the telecom industry is adapting to these changes. When it comes to how much of, let's say, some of the innovation we are seeing will come into commercial effect, I call this the POC purgatory. A lot of times there are interesting innovations that happen in test beds as well as innovation centers, which is a must-have, because I think only when you play around with technology, you get to know what you can do with it. But the business case as well as the use case aspect are so crucial in some of this innovation, because otherwise the industry will never pick it up. They will clap about it, they will say this is great, but they will never go ahead and implement it for massive projects, which is how usually you make industries adapt standards, develop new prototypes and new solutions. And I think that's what we would see. So a lot of the innovation, autonomous vessels, electrified container handling equipment, private networks, digital twins, a lot of these aspects will come for new jobs where I believe the longshoremen of the future will have a side minor degree of data scientists, because there will be so much data that will be produced by a port that they would want to do some machine learning. And that's the only way you will attract the next generation of people to join this industry. And if you look at the logistics industry, at the moment, that's the challenge that we see. There is a labor shortage. It's not that people are losing jobs because of automation. People are not sometimes applying for jobs there.
I like this point about education. That's it's new, but it's a good point, and it's a good direction. Rob, over to you.
I've got about 30 seconds.
No, actually, you got 2 minutes. No more questions. No questions. It's all yours.
Yeah, I was joking. So I think what we're seeing is that there will be a need to push 5G further offshore. So looking at that sort of technology is something that's going to come forwards. I think there will be the seamless handover of different data networks as well. So if you think about where Plymouth is based, it's the entrance to the Atlantic. So we've already run an autonomous ship across the Atlantic. We've done that test already.
Wow.
But the handover from satellite to mesh to 5G, and how that is done is going to be critical, I think. So we've touched on certification. I think the other development that we will see or need to see are simulators or virtual test beds. Okay. So if you look at what's happening with automotive and air and all of that sort of stuff, you need almost a live environment that can be simulated to allow millions of activities. Because the key thing that we need to ascertain, which is what we're doing with Lloyd's, is what constitutes safe enough for autonomous shipping. Okay. So that means that you have to create that environment virtually, but include all of the data feeds that potentially will come in there. So in Plymouth, it's Western Europe's largest naval port, so we have naval activity. We've got passenger ferries, we've got cargo ships, we've got yachts, we've got swimmers, we've got paddleboarders, we've got all of these things happening within the port. And how does an autonomous vessel have the situational awareness to make a decision based on
Very good point.
what it sees? So you wouldn't want to do that live.
Absolutely. So testbeds, certification, private networks, education. I think there's very good points, and I'm happy to be understanding that it's a common agreement. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for your opinions and for being here. And I promise to visit Plymouth very well. So we have it and very soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes for questions. If there are questions in the audience. Questions? If you don't have,
So
I suspect
we have another 10 minutes.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
10 minutes for questions.
That's wonderful.
As
I
I
can keep asking
suspected.
questions all day long.
You wanted to kick us outside, so it's...
Yeah.
No, I just got.
But that's
I got
from the
stressed seeing
moderator's
that watch,
side. From the moderator's side.
But I have questions if there are no from the
Oh, not
audience.
from our audience? Oh,
Okay,
you're
I
the
have many
host, so-
questions actually. Private 5G network slicing, just for the Nokia and you guys that have implemented it. Have you done it? Are you using it in any way in the real tests that you're doing over there?
So I can say this. So we have two kind of entities, right? So you have port terminals. So these are the tenants, and then you have the port authority, which is the landlord who is managing the overall port. So when it comes to the port terminals, they are looking for a complete deployment solution. So they are saying, give me the whole private network that only I use for my business. Then you have port authorities who are saying they want to deploy the network and offer private 5G as a service. And there it becomes a network slicing. And what the technology allows you to do is inside, let's say, the Freeport of Riga, you will have a warehouse, you will have some container terminals, you will have some cruise terminals. And Freeport of Riga can say, we will build this network, and then we will give individual slices, which means your own small mini networks inside this big network for each of the tenants. And that makes it like a good business model.
Operator? Who is
So in
the
this
telecom operator
So
usually?
in this case, the operator becomes the Freeport of Riga. And it becomes interesting because one, it helps the port authorities to attract more interesting companies. But secondly, it can also be a very good monetization model.
Yeah, it's good money.
Because what we see, for example, in Port of Rotterdam, you have so many container terminals next to each other, and no one is able to secure the spectrum to deploy a private network because the neighbor will also want the same.
Yep.
And then they are fighting with each other about, okay, if we get the private network, you will interfere with our network, blah, blah, blah. And there, actually, the Port of Rotterdam as an authority might be at a better position to take it and say, you will get this much, you will get this much.
Yeah.
And that way, every tenant can get good amount of private network.
That's very interesting. Rob, do you see this model? I mean, would a port become a telecom provider?
We do, and
Interesting.
like I say, our test bed is slightly different in that it's ocean focused, as I said before, but we manage the access to that. We manage it directly. So there's no mobile network operator that is operating it for us. So we're responsible for the SIM cards and all of that sort of thing. So clients come to us, we provide them with the access to the network. They can then use it. We've got our control center, so they can utilize that as well. At the moment, this is an innovation test bed. So the numbers are relatively small. So concurrent users, 50 or 60 or thereabouts at this particular time. But longer term, Plymouth is a free port or part of the UK free port system as well. So there's all sorts of opportunities that we're looking at, and we're investigating at the moment to spread the network across the 3 sites that make up Plymouth and South Devon Freeport. What that will allow is exactly what you're talking about. So for advanced manufacturing, for access for clients, all of that sort of thing, that can be done. But we want to run it off the same network. So effectively, you've got an ocean-based element, which is to do with innovation support, and then you've got smart transport between the 3 sites, which is another element, and then you've got the clients of the manufacturing site itself as well. So, yeah, we see that as an opportunity. I think the challenge becomes, is each individual port going to do that? Or
My next question, actually, but please go ahead.
within the UK, one of the conversations is we have 8 free ports around England.
8.
There's 2 going into Scotland, 1 into Ireland, 1 into Wales in the near future. So there is a logic there to say that the Freeport network is common.
Wonderful.
Okay, so if that becomes the case, then you know we're into a very interesting thing. And the final thing that I will mention is short sea shipping.
Okay.
So how do we actually connect all of the ports of the UK into a single network to create a highway around the UK?
Wonderful.
Because then you've
So
got
you see that as well, this interconnection of the ports, and then maybe like an operator becoming a ports operator. That's fantastic, actually, and sounds.
That's my opinion.
But I think I agree. I'm sure Nokia.
It is interesting because it also helps with the capex, right? Because if you look at one small entity,
Yeah, of course.
And-
It distributes the cost and the operations even more. Ansis, do you see some use cases for this kind of thing over here in Europe and in the Baltics? I mean, you guys have many countries around, many nice ports around, a very nice contained sea. What do you think?
No, what was said, I would absolutely agree, because the main task, or one of the main tasks of the Port Authority, of course, is also somehow to invest into the common capex things for the port
Yes.
clients. I mean, on the classic of that's all sort of whatever road, inner roads, railway shunting stations within the port, being that electric grid for the for the port area. So in the same way, most probably also the private mobile network, and I think the example of the Port of Rotterdam is also kind of the good thing. So that means that in some cases where the private clients are not ready for whatever financial or whatever purposes, so that's the task of the Port Authority to come and give a solution. And I mean, like also for Riga, so we have a common approach to cargo control and security of the port clients. So that means that it's a common system, it's a common data, and of course, in many cases you will see that it's done by each and every port client by itself. So it can be both ways, but from the point of efficiency and also the single system. I think that's a port authority who should do that. So I think in this aspect, absolutely. So what then it provides, like for Latvia, maybe it's also worth to looking to, like, we have 3 big ports, on all 3 big ports together. Yes, because we have similar systems. We have also the same approach on a free port areas. So that means the customs procedures, and also cargo control principles are very similar. Very similar, or not even the same. So yeah, that's an area.
Sounds like a good next step for discussion. I mean, Honor, do you see a need for that? Maybe like you could be in the shoes of a customer of this kind of like telecom system, because I think everybody's focusing on CapEx, but I like also to focus on OpEx, because CapEx is one-off, but OpEx keeps going, and it's at least, I think, an equal level problem. But please,
I believe OpEx as well. We like CapEx and OpEx.
well, I think we dislike them equally. That's what we say. But go ahead.
I believe there should be a hybrid system. There are so many use cases, so many types of different port cases in the world is possible. So we should consider hybrid solution. Port could have the part.
Hybrid, yeah.
Hybrid.
I agree.
Some ports could use a slice from the commercial network. Some ports could use their own private networks. But the important point is systems should be able to talk to each other, exchange information to each other. Since it's an international operation.
You mentioned that twice, and I want to understand, like, why don't they? Is it a data standardization issue? Where do you see the actual problem there?
Data standardization is always an issue. We should place a good standard between them. And second point is local regulations somehow putting the UK started thing, Finland started another thing. The different standards is coming on the screen.
Are all these talking to each other, like the Finland and the UK, or is it going to be?
Some points they are talking, so there are some commonalities, but some of the specific things you should set the rules of the game here.
The rules of the game.
Yeah, they should come together. Since it's an international operation, globally everything should be able to talk to each other.
Answers really quickly, because I want to give a last word to Santiago as well. But
it's just
a
small thing you mentioned.
Please.
About the Baltic. Yes, Baltic is very enclosed sea. I would say put the base stations on regular traffic ships. You would be able
that's
to
that's another wonderful idea that's also being explored. Santiago, from all you've heard, any more comments you want to make? I think interesting points keep being raised, actually.
No, absolutely. I think it has been everything very interesting. I think one of the points that I really agree is that there is a need to have international cooperation to develop standards. I think this will go step by step. We have also the issue of certification, which is of course a problem. On the other hand, I always put the example of the battery propelled ships. Some of the panelists already raised. For example, this is an issue that is not really standardized at international level. There is no specific certification, but still we have like more than 400 ships already operating on batteries, and another 500 that are going to come soon. No? So in general, and that what's the implication? Well, basically, regulation will follow. No? What the industry is doing. No? In the regulation, there is always the possibility to use the certification of novelty and innovative designs. No? Obviously, that's not the ideal solution in the long term, because we all want the standardization and we have tailor-made and each one its own standards is not good, but it's the starting point. I think for regulators, it's difficult also to regulate and certify something which still does not really exist. And I think regulation will follow industry. I think that's the certification will follow industry step by step.
Wonderful. I think we got our 10-minute bonus that we wished for. Was fantastic. I think it was very necessary. So I'd like to thank all of you for this excellent discussion. It's exciting me because there's just so much to do and so much new models to explore going forward. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.